After such a long day, I won't be long, I promise you.
No. Be long!
Be long! To me, that means about 280 minutes. So, first of all, I want to thank Freedomworks for doing this. And I asked to be here. They're not paying me to be here or anything else. I asked to come here to be with you today and to be with them.
Thank you.
Because Freedomworks, and in particular Adam, there were two guys that when Freedomworks first came to me for this march, they came to me and they said, hey, we want to do a march, and there were some rather shifty people in the GOP that was around Freedomworks at the time. Thank God they're all gone. But it was Matt Kibbe and Adam Brandon. And Matt, as you know, has started his own venture now, and he has moved on, but Adam is here, and I have tremendous confidence in him, and I have seen him behind the scenes for a long, long period of time, wherever he has gone to. I just wanted him to hear how much I support him and Freedomworks, and I believe we are on an amazing adventure. And I think the next 12 months, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I believe we are headed towards 1968 and all that that implies. I believe with the Democratic Convention being in Philadelphia, we are going to see them try to burn that town to the ground. And so that's a strange thing to... I've lived in Philadelphia, so I understand, but we are headed for very difficult times. And it's really obvious why we're headed for those times, because we have disconnected from everything that is right and true. There is a lack of truth in our country now.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And it is time that we restore that truth. And we are very, very clear on what that truth is. That, quite honestly, that truth has nothing to do with political parties, obviously. It has nothing to do with who's going to be the next president of the United States. That truth comes from one source, and that is nature's God and nature's law. And God has shown us the way out. And I mean, I know that there is a difference. I'm speaking at 3 different church services tomorrow, and I'm going to get all Jesus freaks on them tomorrow, and I won't do that to you, but I will tell you that there is a clear path, and our founders knew it, and it does come from the scriptures. And if you look at the things that we can learn from history, and we can learn from what our founders knew, when our people came over from overseas, and they were on the Mayflower and the Arabellum, it was John Winthrop who was on the Arabellum in the whole of that ship, and he talked about a shining city on the hill. We are at a place now, especially with what we're doing with Planned Parenthood, with what we're doing with the Iran deal, with how we are actually having political candidates who are listening to Black Lives Matter. We have absolutely taken and embraced death. And I do not believe that God could be any more merciful. When we see the things that are happening now in our world, honestly, them debating yesterday about Iran on September 11th, a lot of people will look at that and say that is horrific. I believe that is a tremendous blessing. I really do. Because I do see what God is trying to do to us in waking us up every step of the way. There is nothing that he could do more to wake us up on the sorry situation that we're in embracing the Muslim Brotherhood and the mullahs in Iran than having that vote happen on September 11th so we can all say, good God Almighty, what are we doing? He is giving us the same blessing when it comes to Planned Parenthood. He has raised these amazing people up to be smart enough, to be wise enough, to be careful enough, to be able to take their cameras into several situations over and over again and have the courage to stand and do that. And then have the ability to think it through, the ability to map the entire strategy out and have it come out carefully over weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yes.
So we can see clearly death, what we're doing and what we're endorsing. There is no way that God Almighty that I know could make it more clear than showing us the petri dishes with the babies and saying, choose now, life or death. Choose now. I want you to know we all have our own purpose for living. We, all of us, each of us, were born at this time for a reason. We were placed in our positions for a reason, if we're humble enough. Which reminds me, I could do about 35 minutes here on Donald Trump just on that, but I won't. If we are humble enough, we will recognize that we have been placed at exactly where you are for a reason. I believe my reason is to ring the bell. My reason is to warn. I am somebody who has the advantage of being up on top of the wall and being able to see a little bit over the horizon and see the hordes that are coming. And it is my job, in my position, to warn the people. What you do with that is up to you. What America and the world does with that is up to each individual. But it is my job to warn, and I will tell you that I spend a lot of my time on my knees begging the Lord, what do I tell them? What do I tell them? Wait. He has sent me to read Jeremiah. That doesn't really end well. But Jeremiah was very, very clear. In fact, God was very clear. You tell them right now. Jeremiah, you go ahead, you tell them. You tell them the sorry state that they're in, and you tell them that I'm about to withdraw all of my protection because I can no longer protect these unrighteous people. Right. And if they don't turn around, I will allow them to be wiped off the face of the earth. It is the promise that God made when Moses was looking down at the promised land, and he said to the Israelites, listen, you have a choice right now. Choose light or darkness, life or death. If you choose life, you're going to be fine. If you choose death, there will come a time where God will withdraw and you will be wiped off of this promised land. I warn you today, we are at that point. We are at the point of choosing. And if we choose life, if we choose light, if we choose God, we will be okay. It's not going to be pretty getting there, but we will be okay. But if we do not, we will be wiped off of this land. Now, how do we fix that? Jeremiah said, let me just tell them that. And God, you don't see God usually give up on people very often. And he said, Jeremiah, don't even talk to them. Stop praying for them. They're so lost. Stop praying for them. He told them. They did nothing. Then he said to them, God said, tell them, Jeremiah, just become slaves. They've already sold themselves into slavery. They just don't know it yet. Just accept their position of slavery and I'll let them stay in the land. They didn't do that. They were wiped out of the promised land. So now how do we reverse these things? The first thing that we have to understand is we are going to be at a time right now, beginning right now, we are in a new season. I believe this fall is the beginning of a new season, and it is not a good season, but it is a new season, and it will be a season where giants are born. It is a season where giants are made. We are made by history. We don't make history, we are made by history. And whether or not we choose to stand up or sit down, to cower or to move forward, that's our choice, each of us as individuals. Now let me show you the shining city on the hill. What had happened? If you look, we call it the shining city on the hill. And what is that? It's a place where everybody can look at it. Everybody can see it. In fact, in Jerusalem, it used to be the temple. And they built the temple up on the hill. And when you brought your tent, you would put your tent out and you would make it so your tent opened up. So when you opened up your tent, the first thing you saw was the temple. The shining city on the hill, our shining city on the hill, is that light that Emma Lazarus talks about, that imprisoned lightning that I hold beside her golden door, that light that lights the world and is a beacon to the rest of the world. We are set apart if we do our job right. But we have let decay and greed and corruption in our own lives, forget about Washington, in our own lives, we have let these things happen to us. And so our walls have come down. And if I may equate it to Jerusalem, in the time of Nehemiah, the walls came down. Here's this great city. God retracts and they're destroyed. So what happens? How did they rebuild? What did Nehemiah do? This is really important for each of us because you already understand that, but I want to have you really truly listen to my words today because tough times are coming and you have to know this from the soles of your feet to the tops of your head. You have to know how the story ends. Nehemiah has to go in and he has to rebuild the walls. Well, that's impossible. That's impossible. There's still warring going on. Who's going to rebuild the wall? How is that possibly going to happen? The gates are down. The wall has been destroyed. There's slaughter in the streets. How can we possibly, we can't get anybody to rebuild it. Yes, you can. By me going to you and saying, your house inside is right here. Your house is right here. And your house is here and here and here, all the way around. Here are your houses, all by the gates, all by the walls of Jerusalem. I don't want you, who lives here, to worry about this part of the fence. I want this person to worry about this part of the wall. And I want you to worry about this part of the wall. And the first thing we have to do is we have to clear the rubble because it's all over the place. The stones have come down and there's nothing but rubble. So the first thing you have to understand is the foundation is good. The foundation is solid. The foundation is real. There's nothing that needs to be done to the foundation. The foundation, our Constitution, the principles behind the Bill of Rights that come from nature's God and they are nature's law. They are unmovable. Right. They are never changing. They are eternal principles. The foundation is good. Now, remove all of the rubble sitting on top of it. But remove the unrubble. Don't worry about the rubble over here or over here, over here. You only have to worry about that part. Because that's what's in your literal backyard. It's just that. And so I need you in your backyard to worry about that. And then you in your backyard, you build this. You in here, you clean the rubble off. You make sure what's in your backyard is clear to the foundation. And then you rebuild your part of the wall. And if each of us do that, before you know it, the wall has been rebuilt. Now, as the people were doing this to the wall, here's the problem. There were no gates. May I suggest that you have met the men and women of that gate today. The Freedom Caucus are the men and women that will stand and block the gate. They must be united and arm in arm. We must start to think like Martin Luther King thought. He knew. He could see. He knew the foundation was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he said to his people, if you just do right in your life, and you are willing to stand shoulder to shoulder and link arms, and never blow back, never, they'll hit you, they'll strike you, they'll send the dogs after you, never strike back. Which I could probably spend another 40 minutes here on Donald Trump, which I won't. We are not a people of vengeance. Vengeance belongs to God. We are a people united in a peaceful purpose. They watch the gates. We build the wall. This is what we need to do. This is how they did it. This is what we must do today. And we are going to go through difficult times. But I ask you, and you don't need to answer because I know who you are. We have been together for a long time. I know who you are. We have to ask all those who join our ranks, what is it you're afraid of losing? If you're afraid of losing your position, if you're afraid of losing your chairmanship, if you're afraid of losing your business, if you're afraid of losing your reputation, your friends, your job, your house, I promise you, you will in the end be part of the problem, not of the solution. If you instead say, my reputation, they'll say whatever they're going to say about me, and that's fine. I know who I am. I don't need my house. I don't need my car. If everybody decides to boycott my business, if they decide to throw me in jail because I believe in God's eternal principles and I will hold the line in my backyard, so be it. I will be mocked and I will be put in jail, but I will stand because I know what is true. We truly live in a moment of giants. And I want you to understand that. This is a golden opportunity. We are the luckiest people on the face of the earth. I know it doesn't feel that way. And it's going to feel less like that in the coming days and months and years. But I am telling you, this is a miraculous time to live. Because each of us are going to face, there are no spectators anymore. There will not be a time where you can just follow the crowd. You have to know who you are and be willing to stand. And those who are willing to stand will be remembered as giants. We have an opportunity right now. We started the Nazarene Fund 4 weeks ago. Some of you, please stand up so I may thank you if you were with me in Birmingham 3 weeks ago. Stand up if somebody was in Washington, D.C. earlier this week. Thank you. You may not feel that you're being heard. You may not feel the press mocked those in Washington. The press ignored those in Birmingham. It doesn't matter. They are so far out of their league, they have no idea what's about to hit them. We started the Nazarene Fund for the Christians because, quite honestly, I don't know how to sort out the Muslims. I don't. I know there are really good Muslims over in Syria that are just as much in trouble because they're not Muslim enough with ISIS. But just like I would have said in the 1930s, you're a German, you say you aren't for socialism, but I don't know if you are or not. I don't have time to sort it out. I'm just one guy, I can't sort it out. But I can go to those who are German and Jewish and see that they've been marked and they were not part of the Nazi movement, and I can say to them, come have shelter with us. We are a nation. The tempest tossed are supposed to come to us. And right now, the Statue of Liberty has turned her back on the tempest toss. The wretched refuse of their teeming shores are being turned away. Christians who have received the mark of the Nazarene It says you follow the Nazarene. It's the same that the Hitler squads did with the Star of David. You follow this, you can kill them. I put a goal out of $10 million 4 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. When were we in Birmingham? 2 weeks ago. Woo. Time flies when you're having fun. 2 weeks ago, I put a goal of $10 million out. This is not like Jerry Lewis where somebody's going to come out with a giant oversized check and say, 7-Eleven is here to help you out. It's you. It's my radio audience. It's the Blaze audience. In 2 weeks, we are now almost, I haven't had the official number today, but we are almost at $6 million in 2 weeks. And every single dime of that money will go to vet, to get them over to a country, to set them up in some countries for up to a year. It's to make sure they're connected to a church and a group of people that will take care of them. We are going to move, we will, by December, save almost 1,000 people more than Oskar Schindler did in the whole war. And it is you that is doing it. This is an age of giants and miracles, and you are the giants.
Bring them to America. Bring them
My
home.
staff is over on the ground now in Iraq, and they are vetting. And in the next 4 weeks, we will bring the first families out, but we are bringing them to Hungary because the United States still won't accept them. They said that they will accept them maybe sometime in 2016. They'll think about it. Well, by the time they think about it, those people will be dead. So, as I have said, and I am going to put this word out when we're ready to go, but it will be before January. So help me God, I will go to jail for a righteous cause. That border is open. I'm flying them to Mexico, and we are going to have our own Selma, and we will march them across the bridge to life and freedom.
Yes.
If we are on God's side, God doesn't pick sides. He requires us to pick sides. And if we are on God's side, who dare stands against us?
No one, wasn't that?
But this is the moment of choosing. This is the letter, the actual letter, signed by Neville Chamberlain. This is the actual letter that when he returned from Berlin and meeting with Hitler, he wrote this letter to the Hitler Youth. And in this letter, he says, I saw what you're doing, and you guys are going to play a big role in the future. In this letter, he says, I met with your Fuhrer, and he wants peace as much as I do. When he got off the plane in Berlin, he held up the treaty and said, peace in our day. I will tell you that when I read Jeremiah, the first thing God said to Jeremiah to tell the people, stop listening to the liars. Stop listening to the liars. There were times those people at that time said, God will never wipe us out. Nothing bad can ever happen to us because we have God's temple. How many people have you heard saying, America can never be wiped out. We're too strong. Our economy is too strong. The rest of the world needs us too much. Stop listening to the liars. Step one. Appeasement is never the answer. It will not work. Next thing. Humble yourself. I'm going to tell you an amazing story that nobody ever talks about, nobody knows, we never taught. It's a story of Charles Pomeroy Stone. He was He was an amazing guy who actually was kind of like the first head of the Secret Service, if you will. When Abraham Lincoln was elected and he had to go from Baltimore to Washington, he had a train that brought him to Baltimore, and then he came from Baltimore to Washington for his inauguration. Well, he wasn't popular. Not a lot of people liked him, especially down towards the South, and he was about to cross the Mason-Dixon line. So Charles Pomeroy Stone, who was part of the Union Army, knew this and said, I need to protect the president. And so he's the guy who protected the president all the way from Baltimore to the White House and made sure that Abraham Lincoln was safe. Abraham Lincoln owed him a great deal and became friends with Charles Pomeroy Stone. But they kind of lost touch, but he advanced in the ranks, and during the Civil War, he was hated by the Congress. They hated him because he was not a guy who hated the South. He stood the line for what was right, but he didn't hate Southerners. Well, that wasn't real popular. You needed to hate people. You needed to make sure you embarrassed them and ridiculed them and treated them like garbage, and he wouldn't. He stood the line of righteousness. So Charles Pomeroy Stone, when there was a battle that happened and it went poorly for the Union, somebody needed to pay for it. They needed to hang this around somebody's neck. And so they hung it around his neck. Well, he wasn't even there. He had nothing to do with it. And when they were trying him in Congress, they refused to even allow him to answer the charges, to even testify, to even say, I wasn't even there. How could I have been the architect of this disaster? I wasn't involved at all. Congress blocked him, but they couldn't convict him, so they just put him in jail. And he was in jail, in prison actually, for 8 months, until finally somebody got to Abraham Lincoln and said, you know, Charles Pomeroy Stone is still in jail. They haven't convicted him, but he's still in jail, and he's gonna rot there unless you do something. So Abraham Lincoln signed a bill that said, you must charge and convict, or you must release the prisoners. A month went by. They didn't listen to the president. He still was in prison. Finally, he went to them and said, you open the damn jail or I will do it myself. And they let him out. But he had been so humiliated, his reputation was destroyed. The papers had made him into this monster because Congress had made him into this monster. He couldn't find a job. So he had to, it was so bad for him, he had to leave the United States of America because he could not find work here. He finds himself over in Egypt, and he's working for the French, and he's helping the French rebuild Egypt. He works there until the 1770s, late in the 1770s, and he gets over to the job over there, and he works hard, works well. He comes back thinking, late 1770s, that maybe,
1870.
did I say 1970s?
18.
Yeah, 1870s. Well, I don't know what I just said, but disregard it. Those aren't the facts you're looking for. So the 1870s, whenever you know the time period I'm talking about, we're all wearing weird suits and hats and stuff. Okay, so that time, man, you guys are so picky. Does this sound kind of like a Donald Trump fact? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. So anyway, he comes back and he's hoping that he can get a job. Well, he looks around and he can't really find anything until one day somebody wearing a Union uniform comes knocking on his door. And the country needs his service again. And he looks at them and says, I'm sorry, what? They said, well, you were over and you were working with the French to build things, correct? He said, yes. You're probably the only man that can help us figure this out. The French just sent us a gift, and they're all boxes, and there's no directions of how to assemble the damn thing. Will you help us build the Statue of Liberty? This is the original document, the purchase order for all of the stones for the base of the Statue of Liberty, signed by Charles Pomeroy Stone. When his country called, and when it was based on its principles, he did not have malice, he did not have anger in his heart, he served us, and that statue is a monument to Americans that do the right thing when they are called upon. But it happens time and time again. If you ever saw Valkyrie with Tom Cruise, you know who von Stauffenberg is, Friedrich von Stauffenberg. I don't know if the camera can get a close enough shot of this, but that's the book plate, and underneath you'll see it says Friedrich von Stauffenberg. This is from his library. In fact, this was a gift, very rare copy of Mein Kampf. And it was von Stauffenberg's copy of Mein Kampf given to him by Adolf Hitler. Wow. But if you look at this copy of Mein Kampf, what is so unbelievably fantastic, can the camera get in closer? There's no dog ear, there's no marking, there's nothing. It's never been opened. It's never been read. This guy was not a Nazi. He was wearing the uniform, but he was not a Nazi. And in the end, he stood with his back against a wall and said, "Long live the Republic." He stood when it was his time to stand. He stood too late. He knew the wrong principles, but he was afraid, and he couldn't get anybody else to stand with him until it was too late. We have to understand that the world is not going to come running towards us. It's not going to. It's Gideon's army. It's Gideon's army. There might only be 300 of us at the end, but it's going to be the right 300. I've thought about Martin Luther King a lot. I mean, Martin Luther King was a guy who was cheating on his wife. He was not living a lot of the principles of God. So how did God use Martin Luther King? I have looked at that and looked at that, and I've tried to study that out in my head, and Lord, how was he a man of God? Well, look at the fruit of his labor. Yes, he was. Look at his action in his own personal life. No, he wasn't. So how do you solve that riddle? This is a gospel according to Glen. God was out of all the righteous people, because all the righteous people were sitting in their churches going, "No, I can't say anything because I might lose my church. I can't say anything because I might lose my reputation. I can't say anything because I might lose whatever. I might lose my life." Got it. You need to understand that you can stand up, and God's gotten down to us. He's like, "Oh crap, I'm with the Beck crowd." Okay, good, bring it on. We can be one person, and one person makes all the difference in the world. This is an amazing man. This is from Raoul Wallenberg. Most people don't even know who Raoul Wallenberg is. Raoul Wallenberg was a guy who was all by himself. He stood all by himself in Budapest when they were rounding up the Jews. He was a guy who worked in the embassy for Sweden. And he saw what was going on in Sweden. The king was like, don't, Raoul, don't do that. Stop it. We're in enough trouble. And he's like, but these people need to be saved. This is actually a purchase order for a person. Raoul Wallenberg would take this and he would write this up and he'd say, take off your star. Take off the star, you don't have to. You are now a Swedish citizen. You're with mine, people. You're with me. I claim you. His whole government stood against him. This is one of the last ones he wrote. This woman got out of Budapest. She survived. She went to New York. She became a famous author in New York. She begged him, please, please leave. He said, I can't. There are too many left to save. He would go to the train station and he would have stacks of these. And as they would load the Jews onto the trains, he would take all of these papers and he would stuff them in through the cracks and he'd say, take one, everybody take one, everybody take one. And then he would stand on the top of the train as it was pulling out of the station on the way to the death camps and he'd say, stop the train, you have my people in there. And they would stop. And he'd say, open up the trains. Ask them if they have their passport from Sweden. And they would get off the train and they would go to safety. This is that time again. We are living in a time where giants will be found. I don't know who they are. And it won't be one. It will be those people who are standing in their backyard, looking at their part of the wall, most likely saying, this is impossible. This isn't going to make any difference. I know you feel the same way I do. How many times have you been on your knees at night saying, Lord, none of this is going to work. I don't know what else to do. I can't change the whole world. I'm here to tell you, he's not asking you to. He's asking you to get down to the foundation in your own life. He's asking you to build the wall behind your own home. That's it. When John F. Kennedy went over to meet with Khrushchev, and he was with Khrushchev, and they begged him not to go. He was young and he was arrogant. And they said, Khrushchev, you don't know what you're dealing with. Mr. President, please don't go. He will bury you and embarrass you. And because he was arrogant, he went along with it. And he went over and he said, I've got it. Well, he didn't. And he was embarrassed by Khrushchev. And when he got onto the plane, after being humiliated for the whole world to see, he knew he would get off that plane after he got back from the Atlantic, over the Atlantic, and he would have to give a speech to the American people, and he'd have to apologize, and he'd have to say, what the heck? What did you do, Mr. President? So he wrote that speech on the plane on the way home. Halfway through, his secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, was buzzed on Air Force One. She said, yes, Mr. President. He said, would you please come into the cabin and please remove these papers? She said later that she walked into the cabin of Air Force One and he had his head down on the ground, on the desk, and all of the papers were all over the floor, and he had just taken his papers and he had pushed them off onto the ground. She picked them all up in silence, said nothing, but she threw them all away, except for this one. She thought this was worth saving. I want to share this with you today and share with you a new piece of information that I just found out in some research yesterday. Abraham Lincoln said almost the same thing. This is what he said. June 1961. I know there is a God, and I see a storm coming. If he has a plan for me, I am scratched out to I believe I am ready. I just want to tell you, I know there's a God. I see a storm coming. And if he has a plan for me, I believe I'm ready. Say those words to yourself. I know there is a God. I do see a storm coming. And if he has a plan for me, he does. I believe I'm ready. I want to leave you with one thing. You were asked for a straw poll. Who would you vote for?
Ted Cruz! Cruz!
No. Number one, Donald Trump.
No.
I'm kidding.
Oh, man.
Oh, you're not? Third place. Scared you, didn't I?
Yes.
Scared the crap out of me when they did that to me backstage. Number three with 8%, Donald Trump. Number two.
Are you kidding?
Number two with 12%, Dr. Ben Carson.
Yeah.
And number one with 41%, Ted
Cruz!